All right, episode 4 here of the Grandsire podcast. We know it's the podcast, the most creative name ever, really. Joined here today by a guest I'm super excited about. It is, of course, the man himself, James Lynch. What's going on, sir? How are you?
Doing well, Lucas. How's it going? How's everything going with you?
It's good, man. Back in the States, getting used to, real life again, working full time. So, it's it's not quite the same as before, but, it's good.
That's good to hear. What do you? I don't know if you're allowed to say on air, but what do you do full time? I don't think we've talked about this.
See, I wish I could say something glorious, like head of marketing, assistant market. Unfortunately, I'm doing large packages for Amazon. I'm doing
Nice.
the
That's a good. Hey,
delivery.
listen, Amazon's a big company, man. You can move up. There's a lot of good stuff. Like you, I think you forget how young you are. When I was your
Yeah.
age, I know I'm sounding like that guy who's talking about your age, but I mean, I worked as a fitness customer service rep for years. I did that on the side, on top of like trying to do this MMA thing, back in the day. So, I mean, we've all had odd jobs. I've worked as a hot tub manufacturer. I've worked as, all types of things. So if you're making that money, all the credit to you, because there's a lot of people out of work right now. So there you go. That's the best way to look at it.
No, that's true. Like the money's good, but it's because it's all the large packages. So and people they expect you to come in there and right away and just sling like a big big bike or big treadmill on your shoulder and just go deliver it. It's like, look, man, I work out and everything, but you're gonna have to give me some time because it's if you don't get the technique right, you're gonna throw everything out. Your back, your shoulders, everything.
It's like CrossFit, right? If you don't do it properly, you're gonna kill yourself. So
Yeah, I'm like, if I drink a protein shake at the end of the day, I can pretend like I worked out, right? It's like, yeah, an entire day of working out. I'm like a unofficial professional athlete.
exactly. I mean, it's good to have physical work. I did the whole 9 to 5 in the office, and it's not for me, and it's not for a lot of people. So that's good. At least you're like getting to move around and there's variety, right? Like I'm sure you get to travel to different places, like driving and stuff. So there you go. I think that's a cool job, man. I think for it sounds awesome. I think it is glorious. I'll put it that way.
I mean, the way I look at it is like, not to compare myself to Oprah, but people like Oprah, they always say like they work at, a chicken restaurant or something. And I'm like, when I'm hugely successful, the millions of followers, I'll be like, yeah, I was at Amazon. I was just a regular guy.
Yeah, I think you got to start somewhere, right? I mean, no one started immediately into doing something great, so you got to work your way up. Rome wasn't built in a day, Lucas. There you go.
Yeah, and no, and I do forget about my age. You're right. It's a great point because I always, it's like I'm 23. Like, I have time. I can figure everything out. I always feel like, you have to get started now, but in reality, you don't see that many aside from Nick Baldwin. Young people that haven't figured out in this industry.
Oh, there's a lot of young guys covering the sport, and they're doing a great job. Yourself, Nick, Cole Shelton. I forget how young
Yeah.
he is. It's like crazy to see how young. And there's a lot of them, and times are different. I mean, like there was like think about it when I was your age, and again, I'm using that phrase like I'm really old. I'm not that old. I'm 35, but it like there was no Twitter. Like think of that. There was no Twitter when I was in my early 20s. Like that's crazy. It was MySpace. Actually, I don't even think MySpace was around then. Actually, maybe it was. I can't remember. But anyways, so things have changed. Certainly changed.
Or, speaking of MySpace, when you hear Ariel Hawani, at first he's like, I was hitting everybody up on MySpace, trying to get all the interviews. It's like, I relate to that a little bit, because we have Instagram and stuff,
We've
but
progressed to Instagram. Exactly. Yeah,
yeah.
I know it's a lot different. So
But I mean, it does make it a little bit easier though. Social media. I mean, these guys, sometimes I'm surprised how accessible they are. And it scares me because it's like, I feel like any idiot could just do what I do and just start hitting these guys up. But at the same time, it is a plus for the people that cover the sport.
it is, yeah. And I think, if you're a fighter, you should be a little bit accessible just because, that's an easy way to connect with fans. You'll become more popular. I mean, I was talking to, Billy Quarantillo yesterday. Here's an example of someone who's doing things right. He's on Twitter all the time and he likes interacting with people. And, that he's not a guy that when I say that name, to a lot of MMA fans that comes to mind, but the fact that he's like interacting with people and, being immersed in the community, I think is such a plus. That's how Bilal Muhammad became very popular. I think a lot of people forget that. I remember when Bilal Muhammad had like 50 followers on Twitter, and now he's one of the most popular guys on there. So, I know I'm going off on a bunch of tangents here, but I really can't stress enough. If you're a fighter, just get on social media a little bit, especially Twitter. Twitter's good. Even Instagram, just post something a day. It doesn't take too much time. It's good to interact with people and be accessible.
Yeah, I mean, every time I interview Bilal Muhammad, I'm always complimenting him on his Twitter game. And I heard some of his teammates say you shouldn't do that because he gets a big head. But, you do see the difference now. I mean, he's got, Remember the Show, or I'm pretty sure that's what it's called.
Mm-hmm.
And he's got all this stuff that's working out because people are seeing his personality and, they want to see him more. And he gets more opportunities because he is showing that personality.
It is. And I think that's especially in MMA. I mean, it's not like when you're in the NBA or something. I mean, you're
Yeah.
getting a lot more eyeballs on your games as opposed to the UFC. It's not as much. So I think the more you can get on there, the more you can interact with people, the more you're becoming sort of like a fan friendly fighter, like someone that people want to root for. I mean, that's ultimately what you want as a fighter, is to have a bigger fan base. And by the way, I think the credit needs to go to Mike Biggie Rhodes. He was the guy that started the trash talk at Rufus Sport. He's the one that learned how, I got to give a shout out to him, because I know he's the guy that sort of started the trend of talking trash, and that sort of went to, like I said, Bilal and Gerald Mershart and Jared Gordon. Like, Mike Biggie Rhodes is the catalyst of all this. So shout out to the OG, Mike Biggie Rhodes, former UFC fighter who I think people forget fought Robert Whitaker. That's how this guy fights everyone.
I mean, Mike, I love interviewing him, and well, I've only interviewed him once, but it's like the insight I got from him. Like, even, like I was asking him about the regional scene, like, why don't we see long-term contracts? And he's explaining why, and it's like all this insight that you wouldn't think about unless you talk to someone like him. So it's interesting getting to talk to these veterans, especially someone like him who, kind of has the industry figured out a little bit.
Oh, he certainly has. And, Mike's been around a lot of fighters. He's been in a lot of different experiences. And like I mentioned, he's fought a lot of really good guys in his career. I mean, I mentioned Whitaker. He also fought Rafael Lovato Jr. in Bellator. He's been around. And I think, it's those are the guys that you don't think of that would have that much knowledge, but he's one of them for sure. And I think that's another thing when people look at some of these bigger camps, there's guys in the room that are sort of like the popular ones, not necessarily the big names. So Biggie's definitely one of those guys at Rufus Sport, although he's not there anymore. I know he recently left that gym, but for years, Biggie Rhodes is sort of one of the big characters at that gym.
For sure. And the big thing with you is I always see you do like a million podcasts, right? Like every time I go through the stories on Instagram, you've got like 15 of them a day thanking you for coming on the show. I mean, do you ever like think about maybe not being so accessible to all these podcasts? Like,
all the time. Yeah. Even today, I was like, actually last week, I mean, I try and do, I'll try and do some podcasts. I guess kind of my mentality is like, I want to, if I can, like, it doesn't take me that much time to do it, to get on someone's show. And then also, like, you never know who's watching. I'm always kind of a believer in that like, you never know what audience you could tap into, and all that. So yeah, I mean, there are times for sure. Like, I had to work late last night because I did someone's podcast yesterday, when I could have used that hour to do something else. So yeah, that definitely crosses my mind. But at the same time, I want to be accessible. I think, that's an advantage I have over a lot of other people, is that a lot of people don't make themselves accessible, and so, yeah, to answer your question, yeah, I'm trying to scale back here and there, but yeah, within reason. Like I obviously I'll do like a podcast or two a week, but in general, I try not to do too much because I do have other work to do, and I do a ton of interviews, so it takes a lot of my time.
I mean, I don't get asked to do a lot of podcasts. When I do, I try to do it, but it's like there was one podcast which you did as well that came back to bite me in the ass. Like, it turns out the guy was created this whole storyline about who I was as a person and stuff like that. And
are we talking about the barbecue? Or not? What's his name? I forget the guy's name. Even the guy who got mad at you and me. Is that the guy you're talking about?
Yeah,
that
exactly.
guy's crazy. Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't realize that, because he was like, "You want to come on the podcast?" And and I'm just thinking like, "Oh, cool, it's an opportunity. I don't get to do them often." And then like a year later, he's going off on Twitter about how I'm soft and all this stuff. It's like, but I don't even know who you are. Like, we did one podcast together. What are you doing?
Yeah, so yeah, I did that. Well, yeah, and that's the funny thing. I also only did one podcast for that guy, and it was fine and it was cool. And then I think he wrote something like just stupid, and he was trashing someone, and I was like, I don't even know this guy really. Like, I did one podcast with him, so I think I unfollowed him, and then he took it personally, and then he went up this thing. And then my favorite part of that whole thing, which I don't even think I told you about, because we were talking about this, because I know he came after you, and I said, dude, don't even interact with him. The guy's a moron. And the part I didn't tell you was I saw him after I just blocked him, because I don't usually block a lot of people, but I blocked him because he kept tweeting me, and it was just like, dude, enough. Like, you take the L, let's move along. Like, we don't have to be friends. That's fine, whatever. But I saw him tweet after being like, oh, some people forget where they came from. Dude, I did your podcast once. You were not part of my rise or whatever you want to call it. I barely even know you. And now you're taking credit for like being someone that's like, like, I do everyone's podcast. I interview amateur fighters. Like, this idea that I'm bigger than anyone is hilarious. And like, this guy trying to take credit for like anything I've done in my career, it's like, it's ridiculous. So yeah. And that's another thing I want to touch on here quickly, because I know we talk about like the media and stuff. The more I sort of get, I guess, not say famous, I hate using that word, but the more I get kind of recognized, I guess, the more hate I get. That's something I'm definitely realizing. I'm sure you've experienced that as well. And, there's just people that just want to like, I don't know. I'm still trying to figure it out, but I think there's a lot of people that, I don't know if it's insecurity. I don't know if it's like, they just, most of it is insecurity. I think where people are like, they're upset that you're doing something that they want to do, and then they have to like get upset at you about it. And then hate followers, that's something I'm like being accustomed to, where people like constantly like just not like I'll do like a full podcast for an hour and then they'll pick out one little small thing being like, why did you say that or whatever? And it's like, okay, dude, you're not watching this for like the pleasure of it or like enjoying the content. You're watching this because you want to tell me how much better you are than I am. It's like, I don't even waste time with people like that. Like it's yeah. So my advice to anyone out there, and I have to work on it too, is just ignore people like that. Like when you can see that angle a mile away where you know that you're not going to reason with this person, you know they're not there to have a genuine good discussion, just leave them alone. There's a lot of people are suffering this year. It's 2020. It's been a terrible year for a lot of people. A lot of people are using, people like that have platforms as a way to sort of project their, being upset with their own lives. And so they'll take it out on you, but you can't take it personally. I always tell people this: only listen to the people that you respect. It would be like me, telling LeBron James how to play basketball. Like I would never do that because I don't play basketball. I'm not good at basketball. I have nothing to do with basketball. So why would some random YouTube guy be like, hey, you got to do this on your channel? It's like, you don't have a clue. So there you go. That's another rant I went on.
I mean, the thing for me that I see a lot is, people, I think they get mad because it's like you look at the age of the people that watch, your content. I'm always surprised. I always figure everybody's my age, which is definitely not the case. But you see people 30 and 40, sometimes 50, stuff like that in the YouTube stats. And those people, I think they get mad because it's like, why is this, this child doing this thing that I wish I could be doing and stuff. So I get a lot of hate just based on my age. And I know a lot of people that are younger, they get that too. And yeah, I think it does come a little bit from jealousy and stuff like that. Like why should this young guy come in here and talk to all these fighters and have this kind of access, when I'd like to be doing that. And, I'm much older than him.
Yeah, I think, well, yeah. And then, it kind of ties into, I know Megan Anderson had that tweet the other day about how, you shouldn't criticize people. And I somewhat agree with her actually, because like everyone was kind of like poor Nate Robinson, like the newer generation is going to only know him as the guy who got knocked out, when the rest of us who've watched his NBA career know that he was a pretty good basketball player, and a guy that, had a very long career in the NBA. So I think, fans have a right to criticize, but at the same time, like, would people like it if they came to their work and, like is in your, let's say you're in an office job and you made a mistake on a form. If you had 50 people coming to you and saying, that sucked, you're an idiot. Like that's the equivalent of what that is basically. It's just, you're not on a platform where people have, accessibility to do that. So it's like, if you don't want to be talked to that way, why are you talking to other people like that? That's kind of my philosophy of everything.
Exactly. Or when I was with MMA World, because, before it was like, I wasn't on any real big platform. Like, you're pretty sheltered. You're not getting enough views that you're going to get a lot of haters. But I got put on MMA World and it was like, you just wake up, scroll through the comments. And then it's like, afterwards, it's like, what am I doing? Should I even exist? Am I allowed to talk to these fighters? But there were a few things though, like people be like, your audio is shit. I can fix that. You know what I mean? It's like, that's
there's some good stuff in there, but I think the majority of it really, I mean, it's you're just taking that chance where like you can read through, 50 comments, there might be one good one in there. That's sort of what I discovered. I mean, my mentality before was like, hey, I'll read every comment and then that way I'm sure there's stuff that I can work on. But really, there's a lot of people who don't know what they're doing. I had someone the other day get mad about my background, which I think looks awesome. I think it's unique. And I've had fighters even say that they like the background, but this guy's like, dude, be more professional with the posters. You look like a kid in there. It's like, yeah, but no one else is doing this. Like, you know what I mean? Like, and who are you to tell me that it's professional or not? That's my favorite thing is when people like to use the quotation MMA journalist as if they're somehow more of an expert about how to cover the sport. It's crazy, man. So I see it all. And some of it, just humors me, just people who just want to go out of their way to tell you how great they are and how bad you are. But yeah, it's part of it. Comes with the territory. Like you can't be susceptible. You can't be shielded from criticism. That's kind of the best way I can put it.
I mean, speaking of the background, we saw Korea's finest. John was out there getting a lot of hate for his background, and and then I said something too, because it's like people are always on your ass about the background, and people were coming after me like, shouldn't we like your background? It's like, are you here for my background? You're here for the fighter I'm talking to.
Yeah, that's another thing. That's just it, right? Like you should be focusing on the content. I have people make fun of my looks or something, whatever, and it's like, shouldn't you be watching the fighter? Like I'm the accessory to this thing. I'm just making this ship, sort of steering this ship, so to speak. But the ship itself is the fighter. Come on.
I mean, and at one point, it did help because I did make a mistake where when I was at my apartment, it was like, you could see my bed behind me, you could see my couch, and it bothered me. But, I never really thought about a solution. And then everybody started shitting on me, and I had fighters like, oh, I like your bed.
But even saying that, man, that's not a big deal. Remember, I posted my 10-year photo. I'm sure you saw it, or not 10-year. It was like how it started, how it ended, or whatever. And like you can see now, I'm using like a nice DSLR camera. I was using like a regular Logitech camera before. I had no idea about lighting. Like the very first interview I did, I was using like an orange, like I forget the percentage or whatever it's called, or the K. I'm not the technical term. You know what I'm saying? Like kind of more of an orange light as opposed to a white one. which is what I'm using here. And it looked terrible. But back then it was just like, oh, I got to light my face up. Like it doesn't matter what I'm using. So, but here's the thing, what I want a lot of people who are watching this to realize is that like, there's no like method on how to do this. Like there's no one like that is really, like there's no like rule book on how to create video content. I know there's videos out there, but there's a million of them. So who knows what's right, what's wrong? I mean, I think now I've kind of figured out what works and what doesn't. But I remember when I started, and even same thing for you, it's like there isn't a lot of information out there of like what looks good, what doesn't. I mean, for like about a year and a bit, I had to do all my interviews in my bedroom because I was in a condo and I couldn't, like, I had nowhere else to film. So it's like, what I'm gonna oh, people are like, oh, you got to build a studio. It's like, well, I don't have the money, and I doing this like just enjoy the content. That's kind of what I look at. So yeah, it's you hear and see it all. It's crazy.
I mean, even for me, I came back to the States and, I put like this corner of my room. I was like, I'm gonna put a desk and stuff, and the background's white. And then you know how people are. It's like, I'm like, listen, it's a plain background. It's not distracting. I get shit on, And so I went to Buffalo Wild Wings to, watch this fight, and I got a free poster out of it. And I was like, you know what? I'm not trying to do a background like you do, but I was like, you know what? Let me just put up the poster. Let me put up something so it looks a little bit less plain. And I mean, it's so funny how people are, like, or even John, people are like, oh, it's unprofessional. Who gives a shit? You know what I mean? Is the content professional?
This idea that like, I think this, we're in an interesting time right now, Lucas, because like, it's not like your typical like ESPN sports anchor, like who wears a suit every day. Like, that's not really like, that's good for TV, but you look at a lot of creators, like I sort of, people ask me like, what are you? Like, I consider myself a journalist, but I also consider myself a content creator. So I'm sort of a hybrid here. Like I'm wearing a golf shirt. I'm not, wearing like an undershirt and, I got like a, I'm trying to look somewhat professional, but I don't look like too out of place either. I'm not wearing like a tuxedo right now.
Right.
So, I mean, I wore a freaking Pikachu outfit a couple weeks ago for the Halloween, on Halloween and stuff. So, I mean, I think people got to quit, bringing up this idea that it's got to be, super professional. You can do that hybrid. I mean, obviously you want to look somewhat presentable, but at the same time, like, this idea that we all need to wear suits and it's got to be just like this, whatever green screen. I don't know. It's just like, get that idea out of your head. Times have changed. That's all I'm saying.
Well, with everything getting shut down, we saw all the big outlets start to do everything, on video. And then, I'm looking at everything and people had the big outlets, no idea about lighting. Guys were doing stuff from their bed, like everything that people had shit on us for. And then it's like, it's funny because you always think like everybody's, at least for me, I always think like everybody's one step ahead of me, all that stuff. And then you look at it and it's like, man, even the biggest websites, for the sport, they don't even know what they're doing, or, they haven't even thought about this stuff. So it's interesting when you see that. You think like everybody has it figured out, but in reality, that's not the case.
Well, I think, I don't think, I mean, when the pandemic hit, I think a lot of people weren't anticipating, or they didn't know what to do. And I do see them, some of those channels get shit on a little bit. I mean, let's talk about the one I think is most obvious. And I mean, no disrespect to the people doing it, but I mean, Ariel Helwani's doing his show, and I think like 540p quality or something. Like you look at like Luke Thomas does his in 1080p. A lot of people do, like, you can see the difference. It's clear. It looks better. I know Ariel likes to do his show on Instagram. Maybe that's like a following thing where you can get all his followers there. And then I think if I'm not mistaken, they do the show on Instagram and then they upload it to YouTube. That's why the quality doesn't look as good, but they should be doing it in 1080p. That's my opinion. I mean, people still watch the content. I think for them, it doesn't matter. It's all about the views. And I think if they had, if they make the quality better, yeah, it might increase the views, but I don't think that's like a sticking point. They're there for the content. But I agree with you. I mean, it's a little bit surprising that ESPN, the biggest company, biggest sports company in the world, is not investing in getting, Ariel like a 4K camera, or getting him a DSLR camera to make his content look a little bit better. But that may be a preference thing. They might not have someone that does that for them. I don't know. But yeah, I thought that was a little bit surprising. But hey, that's the advantage to people like you and me who are broadcasting in better quality. And I think people do appreciate that when you can put your stuff out that looks very, very quality in terms of the presentation.
Or look at, for example, Morning Combat. I don't know if you watch that show or not.
I do. Yeah, I watch everything. Yeah.
When the pandemic hit, they sent them super nice cameras and everything. And you see the quality, like you almost forget they're not in a studio because it looks good. It sounds very good. And, and people, they take notice of stuff like that.
They do, yeah. And it's like a little thing that you can do that really makes like a world of difference. And I think people will take you more seriously as well. Like there's a few people who do, well, actually I shouldn't say this. There's a lot of people, Lucas. I mean, you watch a lot of content like I do. Not going to name any names, but there's people who use that like built-in Skype recorder for their interviews. And it's like that little, you know what I'm talking about, right? Where they start the interview and the way the Skype recorder works is like, it doesn't put their video up right away. It just shows their profile photo and then it goes into it. And the quality is like 480p, 15 frames per second. Look, I don't expect everyone to know this. I mean, I have a television background. I took editing in college, so I do know this stuff. But I mean, again, there's resources on YouTube of how to make good videos. I know stuff's expensive. I know if you want to get like a good camera or a good computer, it's not cheap. But if you want to take this, if you want to be taken seriously, you got to have the quality at least looking somewhat presentable. But the people who are doing like the Skype video recorder and it's like split screen and there's no microphone and the lighting's bad, it's like, you know, I watch that and I'm like, I'm not going to watch this whole thing.
Yeah.
You know, that's how I feel. I don't know. People might be different, but.
No, that's exactly how it is. You know, like you're even if the video quality is crap, but the audio is good, it's like, you know what, maybe I just set my phone down somewhere and keep listening to it. But, you know, I try to tell people nicely when I know that they use that, you know, if it's someone I talk to regularly, but it's like, you know, maybe just use Zoom or something like that. You know, even Zoom, it's like there's minimal editing, you can do something good. And, you know, the biggest thing I would tell people though is use an Ethernet cable. That's what
Yeah.
I started using. And it's like the quality just goes up and then the lighting. You know, I don't have the fanciest webcam, you know, it's just a regular Logitech, but you start adding a little bit of lighting and it looks much different. It looks much better. I mean, it doesn't have to be expensive. It can be simple things that you can use to, you know, make it look a lot better.
I agree. I'm going to do a video. I should do a video because you just reminded me on like a budget, like studio setup. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You know, you can use like a webcam. Your iPhone is like a webcam. Most people have smartphones, Samsung, iPhone. That webcam is better than most that's out there. So there you go. Your webcam's done. Everyone has a smartphone. You put that, you get a tripod or something, you get something to hook it up. You can buy like a cheap tripod from Amazon or something, put it up there. Microphones, you can get like a Samsung, SAMSON, not Samsung, the phone company. You can get that. You can get the Blue Yeti. You can get a lot of these USB microphones for under $100. So, I mean, there's no excuse. You can do it. This light I'm using here that's behind me, I have a couple lights actually, but the light that's right behind me here off Amazon, I think it was like under $50. It's all accessible. Everyone has an Amazon account. I know they do. And Lucas will deliver it to you. So there you go. It's all set up. But that's what I'm saying is that like, it's not hard to have an easy setup. Like I remember a couple of years ago, I'm not going to mention the outlet, but they were like, hey, we need donations to upgrade our equipment. We're looking to get $1,000. You don't need $1,000. The stuff I have here is around $1,000, but this is top of the line stuff. There's like for years, I was using my Logitech webcam, Yeti mic. I mean, that's under, you know, $300, basically all that. And then, like I said, you can go even further where you do the smartphone and then you have the USB mic. So this idea that like just ask for help. I don't know why more people don't do that. I see a lot of people covering this sport that don't have a clue what they're doing, and they should be reaching out to people who know what they're doing, like people like you or me or whoever. It's like, hey, how did you get this to, you know, how did this work? And a lot of it's like, I don't know if it's an ego thing, I don't know if it's an ignorance thing, but it's like, come on, it takes 2 seconds with so many people doing video content. Like we kind of talked about off the top there. Putting out good quality stuff, good presentation will separate you from other people. Even if the content's crap, if it looks nice, at least people will tune in a little bit.
I mean, you know, you mentioned the spending the money thing, and I think you have to be smart about, you know, like if I came in and I spent like, you know, thousands of dollars on a setup, it doesn't make sense because I'm not making enough money in MMA to justify it. Or I don't have enough followers and stuff. But someone like you're full time in it, and you know, you do content for everybody, so it makes sense for you to do something like that and invest in it. I mean, even what I have now, everything is like you find stuff that where you can justify the price, like it's not too expensive, it makes sense. This is a USB mic, and for now it sounds fine. But if I ever start getting, you know, bigger opportunities, then I'm going to have to think about doing what you did and switch to, I believe it's called an XLR and, you know,
yeah,
stuff
it's
like
a
that.
Go XLR mini mixer. And I didn't even know about any of this stuff. Luckily, one of the outlets I work for, they were like, hey, you should be using this. And I was like, I'll spend the money. Because for me, I don't know how it works in the States, but this is all a tax write-off for me. So at the end of the year, I can put this toward my taxes and it will, you know, I get like a tax write-off for that, which is good. 2, like, why wouldn't I invest in this? This is my full-time job. Should I not be using the best stuff? So that's how I look at it. And I think the big thing, especially with people that I would say the majority of people covering the sport are doing it part-time, like yourself, which, you know, I did for years. I mean, I had a full-time job. I did exactly what you're doing for years. And, you know, there was a lot of evenings where I could have been out, you know, having fun with my friends. This was before I was a dad and all that. There's a lot of times I missed out on, but I love doing this and I invested in myself. So I knew that like eventually it would work out. But my recommendation to anyone doing that, put some money aside, especially if you're making money on the side doing MMA stuff. Put that money aside, use it for travel to go cover events. I mean, obviously not now with COVID, but that's something you'd look into doing. And 2, upgrading your equipment. Put some money for yourself. Obviously, you're doing that extra work, you know, make sure you're spending some of it. But I'd recommend to a lot of people, invest in yourself. Like it's not hard to do. And I see people out there wanting to do this full time and they're still using a shitty webcam. It's like, no one's going to hire you for that, you know? So.
Well, that was my thinking too. It was like, you know, if I'm not going to be the best at what I do, which obviously, you know, I'm not, but it's like, if I can have a better presentation than people that are better than me, then it might make an outlet think twice. Like, you know, maybe it looks a little raw, but it's like, you know what, his presentation is good and we can work with this. You know, it's kind of like you have to figure out what are your strengths going to be. And especially in this industry, like, well, I mean, we mentioned it, not everybody has figured out the quality thing. So it's like, if you can get an advantage on something like quality, then it's like you really should go for it.
Yeah, and something we've talked about too is I think, and you do this as well, which is great, is, don't just like, there's this idea that if you want to blow up, you want to get hired, you got to get that one viral video. And that's just not true. I mean, it comes down, like, one outlet's not going to hire you because of one viral video. It's got to be an accumulation of things. And like I said, I think the best way is to look at this as a long-term game. You've been doing this for a couple of years, right? But how many fighters probably know you now? I know, like, Lauren Murphy, I saw gave you a nice shout out the other day. Like, that's what you want. You want to do interviews where fighters are going to want to come back. I can tell you a handful of fighters, Lucas, that won't do interviews with certain media members, but they will with me because we have that good rapport. And it's not sucking up to them. It's just about treating them with respect. It's about doing a good interview. It's about not taking an hour of their time. That's another thing I see a lot of people doing. Hey, we're going to get this fighter on for an hour. Do you think they have that much time? And do you think someone's going to listen to you for an hour when they got Joe Rogan they could listen to or something, So, but yeah, I think the biggest thing is like, just, investing in everything. Do your UFC interviews, but also do your prospects, your up and comers. And there's always more room to, there's always areas to cover in this sport as well, in terms of, getting the word out there and just being known. Like, I can walk into a handful of gyms right now. People know who I am. It's not me bragging. It's just, I've done so many interviews that people know me. Like, I can't tell you how many times we'll be like, oh yeah, I've seen your interviews. Like, that's the goal. That's always been the goal.
Yeah, the Lauren Murphy you mentioned thing, that was a really cool thing, because I don't know if you watched the first interview I did on video with Lauren, but it got pretty crazy. There was some crying, there was definitely some and so to take a situation where the first interview was a little bit rough, but managed to navigate it. So the second one goes great, and then you get a shout out. It's like, you know what, I'm doing something right. And with fighters, I don't know if that's the case for yourself, but I know for me, I don't hear a ton of feedback from the people that matter, like the fighters. So I don't know if when they finish the interview, it's like, oh, fuck, I'm glad that's over. If it's like, yeah, cool, let's go back to my day. So when you see something like that, it means a lot, because it's like, you know what, I'm doing something right. Even if it's just with one fighter, but you're on the right track.
Yeah. And I think, and that's all that should matter. I always tell people, like, remember your compliments, because we were talking about the haters earlier. It's easier. I remember I had a comment last week that someone made, and they were like partially right, but I was like, man, that sucks. And then it's like, kind of bums you out. And then I remembered, like, also last week, like, I had Laura Sanko on, and she's like, hey, I watch all your interviews. Like, that's what I should focus on, not some dumbass who's like trying to ruin my day. You know what I mean? So it's really important to, especially if you're covering the sport, because like I said, the more popular you get, the more people are going to come into the woodwork, tell you suck, tell you they can do a better job. And it does get down on you. I mean, we're not built like this. I mean, if you look at before the internet, like, you didn't have just random people running up to you and saying you suck. Back in the day, if you were a celebrity, you get hate mail. I mean, that's different. You can throw the letter out, but it's not like right in your face. But it's, now it's just so easy to tell someone, to ruin someone's day or write something crappy. So I always recommend to people to, write down your compliments, keep them somewhere. I have a whole folder of stuff, or, if I'm having a bad day, I'll go look at it. And it sounds stupid, and some people are like, oh, you got to be tougher. But look, at the end of the day, no one likes being told they suck, even the most tough person. So I really recommend doing that. And also, yeah, I think all that matters in the end, in terms of what you do is what, the fighters think, the managers think, the people that really matter in the sport, and people you respect in the industry. That's the biggest thing, not some random person who's going to tell you I do this better. Look, if they're such an expert, do your own channel. I tell that to people all the time. It's like, look, like, if you're great at this, like, all the power to you. Like, I have people get mad about my fight picks. I tell you right off the bat, this is an opinion thing. I'm not studying tape. This is just my opinion based off memory, based off stats, based off whatever. And people are like, oh, you picked this wrong. It's like, well, it's a free show. Go watch something else. Like, you know what? If I don't like someone's content, I don't watch it. I don't even comment on it. I just leave it. It's all good, So.
I mean, the thing with the comments too is, when it's someone that matters that says something negative, I mean, I know for me, like, and I think you knew about it. There was like a PR guy that was like, didn't like my interviews, wasn't going to give me interviews. And it's like, it really, like, for like a week, I'm sitting there like, oh God, like, do other fighters feel like this, dude? So I had reached out to managers that, I knew we'd done enough stuff that we could talk, quite frankly. And, and they both told me, it's like, nah, I never heard anything negative from the fighters. And even one of them was like, send me some interviews. I'll give you some feedback. And at the time, that's when I didn't have any hair. And everybody said the same, take off the hat. It's like, yeah, but I'm bald. I look 40. So it doesn't take much to throw you off. And then you start to question everything. But then you have other people that sort of let you know, it's like, nah, you know what? Maybe that person thinks that, but other people that matter, they don't necessarily think that themselves.
Well, and I think too, like with that PR person, I'm pretty sure I know who you're talking about, but like, I think even them, like, maybe there was some truth to that, but at the same time, like, also, like, take that and build on it, don't let one thing, like, we're all going to make mistakes. It's inevitable. Like, I made a mistake yesterday I was talking about some LFA champ and I got the wrong weight class. I mean, it happens, right? Yeah. But the big thing is, like, you can't focus on that. You just got to learn from your mistakes. You got to move forward. and really just, keep it consistent. I think that's the big thing, is just, trying to improve, trying to get better. You don't want to be in the same spot you were 5 years ago or 3 years ago or 1 year ago. Try and evolve, try and get better. And that comes with practice, with doing as much content as you can. And two, getting feedback. A lot of people don't want to do that because they don't want to hear the answer. But you got to do that, otherwise you're not gonna get any better. And there's like little things I've learned over the years. I remember years ago, one guy just went through. He's like, I'm a former TV producer. This is what you're doing wrong. And he had some stuff in there that I didn't agree with, but he had some good points. Apparently I kept my mouth open a lot during the interview, which I didn't realize. So I stopped doing that. Nodding my head. I look like a golden retriever sometime. I look at some of those old interviews. It's like, yeah, I definitely don't need to do that. So sometimes criticism's good. It sucks. I mean, no one wants to hear they're not doing a good job, but sometimes you got to take it and just, weigh the options and see what people think, and then just move on. But the biggest thing is evolution. Like, we know people in this industry, they're doing the same thing they've been doing 3-4 years ago. You can't be like that. If you want to get ahead, you got to evolve. You got to try new things, try different stuff. And it's tough. It's not an easy industry to make a living in, let alone even just getting paid work. But you got to stay ahead of the curve. And that's, being innovative, improving, being consistent. Those are all keys to finding success in this industry.
I mean, that was an issue I had back when I was at MMA Latest a few years ago. Was at some point, Matthew Wells left, who was my editor, and he helped me improve in a lot of ways. And when he left, it was like, okay, Lucas, now you're an editor, and it's like, well, I have no idea what I'm doing, and I stopped improving because I didn't have anybody under me telling me like, hey, this was bad, and you sort of realize if you don't get that feedback regularly, you're gonna get stuck, and you have to. And that's when I realized I have to move on. I have to find someone that is going to help me. And at the time, that was Hunter Homestek, and I think the feedback is super important, because otherwise you're going to do the same shit every time. And you need someone to tell you like, man, you do this every interview and it sucks. And if you could stop doing it, you're going to improve so much. And the feedback is super important.
And like another thing is like people doing this for free. Like, I mean,
Yeah.
I guess if you're fine doing it for as long, but there's people who've been doing this for years and they're not making a penny. And it's like, and then people say it's not about the money. Well, it is. I mean, that's time you could be using that you could, use it for whatever. It doesn't matter if you're making a little bit of money, at least that there's like more incentive to keep going. But I can't tell you how many people, I mean, I'll give you a bunch of names off air if you want, but people who were like, I'm going to be the next big thing in this, in journalism or whatever. And then they just fade because they're not making any money, and they never bothered to learn how to get better. They never bothered to, improve their skill set, and they're stuck. And it's, and ego is a big thing, man. Like, I try not to, I'm really big on that. And that's one thing that does irk me about a lot of these newbies is that, they'll get a couple interviews, and because fighters are easy to get a hold of. I mean, they are. If you go on Instagram and you say, hey, I'm with, MMA, whatever, it doesn't matter. You can say MMA garbage. It doesn't make a difference. They're still going to do the interview. It doesn't matter. A lot of fighters are very accessible, but then a lot of people get cocky and they're like, oh, I've already got such and such UFC fighters. I'm on my way to being, full time. It's like, no, you're not. Like until you're making money. That's the first step, is making money. Number two is then maybe going full time. But even then it's tough. Like I always tell people this, and I think there's maybe a misconception out there, but there's probably 15 to 20% of the people that cover MMA are actually doing this full time. And like 10% of them are people that work for one outlet. And they're getting like a salary and all that. Like I don't have that. I don't have a salary. I'm a full-time freelancer, but I work for 12 outlets. And people are like, why do you work for so many outlets? Well, it's because that's what I got to do to make this full time. And plus, if something falls out, I don't have to worry about finances if I've got other outlets I'm getting work from. So I've sort of had to create this job. It didn't really exist. And I think I am the only guy right now who's doing full-time, mainly video, right? There's a few full-time like writers like, Cole Shelton, Drake Riggs. But in terms of just doing strictly video, I'm the guy. And that's, that's what I have to do in terms of making this full time. So yeah, I think the big thing is just like, you got to keep moving forward, and moving forward is getting paid. And there's ways to do that. You can do sponsorships, which, I've never had any luck doing that. I'm still trying to figure that out. It's a tough one. And then two is just getting on with an outlet, like working for My MMA News, like an Eric Kowal or someone like that, where it's like, he might give you, a couple bucks for an interview or something, but it's good. At least you're getting something, right? That's the big thing. Cause there's a lot of these websites are like, oh yeah, I'm doing this and doing that, but you're not making any money. It's like, why are you doing this? I don't know. It's my thoughts.
Well, the working for free thing, I think when you start, you have to do it for free, and then you have to
100%.
realize at what point, because doing it for free. I talked to a well-known journalist, a few years ago, and he was like, "Listen, if you're doing all this stuff for free, you're actually going to bring down the value of everyone else because you're willing to do the same work for free." And that's when finally I was like, you know what, it's a great point, and you know what, I don't want to damage the industry by doing it for free, and and I've never talked about it, but when I started with Flow Combat, that's how it was. It was like, I needed to find a big play, and I was too ambitious. I was doing things before I was ready, and it was like, kind of you're working for exposure, and and the big thing I was like, if I'm not getting paid, then you have to help me improve. And eventually there was a point where none of that was happening. And it was like, all I'm doing is that, I'm doing damage to the industry by doing something like that. And then when I stopped, it was like, I'm not going to work for an outlet that pays, it's like $1 for like a million views.
Well, yeah,
But at the
that's
same,
dumb. Yeah.
yeah, it's like, it has to be something like, my MMA news for that is great. I mean, you want to work, at least don't drive down the value of everybody else, especially if you are fans of people in the industry and you're friends with people. It's like, you don't want to hurt what they're doing by, doing it for free and just, I don't know. That's kind of the way I saw it after that person kind of explained it to me.
See, I don't agree with that actually, and that's I'm glad we're on here and we're talking about this because
Yeah.
I don't think it like there's so many outlets out there, and there's a bunch that do pay. I don't think it matters if you're working for free. It's not like if anything that person's dumb for working for free for so long. Like I think realistically, if I'm being honest here, I think if you're working in the industry for 6 months, that's when you should start looking. I think 6 months is a good timetable if you're doing consistent content every week. If you're doing, say, one interview a week or something, just slowly building that up. I think that's a reasonable amount of time to say, hey, maybe it's time to start getting paid. 6 months to a year, because that's what it was for me. I mean, the first paid thing I ever got in this industry, like as a freelancer, was MMA Oddsbreaker when I was doing my only audio show with Adam Martin, not video. They paid us per episode. That was the first paid thing I got in this industry, and it took a while. I think we had done the podcast for about 6 months. And yeah, we moved on to there, and that's when I realized it's like, okay, this is how I can make some money on the side is doing content on there. But I don't think I think you have to do it for free for a bit just to build a platform. And there's for example, like MMA Sucka, right? Like there's a good platform to start. There's plenty of writers, plenty of people that have gone through there that have gone into bigger and better things. And people are like, why would I work for free? Well, it's a good place to learn, first off, because there's no school of MMA journalism out there, and if there is, I wouldn't go to it, because whoever's teaching it probably is someone that fizzled out of this industry. And two, it is, it's good to have that platform, and it's good to be part of a community, because if you go to like an MMA Soccer or My MMA News or somewhere like that, you're going to be immersed with a bunch of people that are already working for that site. You're going to already network. You're going to learn from people who actually know what they're doing. And then from there, you're going to be set, because it's not like you're doing it on your own and you have no clue what you're doing. Right. So there is some value in doing that. But yeah, I think, I think, and in your case too, like all, just speaking sort of objectively here, like I think part of it too is you jump from being a writer to a video with no on-camera experience. Yeah. Like that's tough. And you were interviewing big names like Adesanya and whoever, and that's tough. I think that's a tough way to go. But there's only one I shouldn't say one, there's two people that I've seen start with big guests and actually make something out of it, and that's Submission Radio. But they were already good on air before they went that route. And if you remember, they wwere audio for years. They only went video, I think, 2 years ago. So you got to remember that. Like people, it's kind of something that actually irks me, not you specifically, but there's a lot of people where it's like they're a writer and they automatically think they're good on air, and it's like, no, there's an art to it. You have, like, even for me, before I started doing video interviews, I took television broadcasting in college, so I had on-air experience. I literally was like an anchor. I had a sports show back in the day. And two, I've had the reps in terms of like what it's like to do on camera stuff. So I had already been prepared going. Mike Heck's a good example. Mike Heck comes from a radio background. That's why Mike Heck's great on air. When he went from audio to video, it was fine because Mike's very established on air. He has that experience. Mike's also my age. Like that's one thing. Like a lot of these people, they're getting on and they have no on-camera experience. And it's like, they wonder why people aren't watching their stuff. It's because you're inexperienced. But look, you're a lot better now than when you started. Same thing with me. I was terrible when I started, even with all that experience. There was stuff I was screwing up on or whatever, but you learn to get better. That's kind of what I'm getting at here. And I think the reps are so important, getting that practice, getting that experience. And that's why I say, don't start with the big names right off the bat. Do some prospects in there as well. Build up your being comfortable on camera. And then from there, you'll only get better and better, because you don't want to do an interview and then you're just nervous on air and you look like a clown, So it's, that's why I say it's good to do the hybrid of UFC fighters and prospects. That's my recommendation.
I mean, yeah, from the start, I mean, I was with, I was in college and, and I was doing tons of interviews, which meant that tons of transcribing, trying to write an article and all that stuff. And, my thinking was like, if I'm talking to all these big names and I could get it on video and do it on a platform like YouTube, maybe I could build something. But, the thing is, you're so excited to start a new type of content that you half-ass it. I was filming it with the computer webcam, which was very obvious. The lighting, I mean, there's like a light behind my head, a shitty lamp behind my computer. Like, you look back on it and it's like, man, if you could have at least started more quality, like even though you might not be very good, but at least you'd start from a good place. And I can't even watch those interviews now because I look at it, it's like audio's crap. And it's frustrating because it's like, it sets you back. I mean, even with Flow Combat, it was like I sent in the interview with Israel and they were like, yeah, we're going to stick with writing. And then it's like,
And you couldn't take that personally though. But if you look at it now, because I mean, you can look back on how things were, and I do this all the time. I reflect. like looking back now, like you had no on camera experience. Like, of course it was going to end up like that. Like, like no one's just born good on camera. You have to put in the time. Like how much, honestly, before you did like that Israel interview, how many interviews on camera, how much on camera stuff had you done prior to that?
Zero.
That's what I'm saying. So of course it's not going to translate very well. And that's probably why they wanted you to stick to writing, because the writing's good. And with the on-camera stuff, it's like, you got to build up to it. Like no one just goes on camera. And if they do, they don't, there's a lot of people who aren't good on camera. There's people who still are on camera and they're terrible.
Yeah, I mean, and that's something that, when I joined my MMA news, like Eric's good about, giving you, feedback and stuff. And the thing is, I didn't get that much feedback for the videos aside from stuff I could figure out. And then one day he was like, we need to get an energy drink in you before these interviews. And I didn't really know what he meant by that, and then I started hearing more and more. It's like, you're not high energy when you do these things. You're a little bit. And then I started to think about it. It's like, man, I think I fall into the habit of, just talking regularly, and you forget that you have to put on a personality. And someone that does that a little bit to the extremes, like, Brian Campbell, he puts on this gigantic personality. And I think it's something you don't realize until, someone comes to tell you. And it's like, you do have to play it up a little bit when you're on camera.
Well, look at the schmo, right? I mean, I've talked to
God.
Dave off camera. He's nothing like how he is in his interviews, right? Like it's one of those things where it does take a bit of practice to get that. And I mean, I talk kind of like I do off camera, I would think. I mean, we've talked before off camera. I would think I kind of sound like that, but it's again, it just comes from practice. And the other thing is like, I listen to sports talk radio all the time. Like that's another reason why I think I was like, when I started doing on camera stuff, I had a lot of experience, not only from college, but I mean, when I used to work at a golf course, we're talking about jobs. One of my favorite jobs of all time was I worked at a private golf course here in town where I live now. And we used to work, I was like a club steward. So I'd have to like change the towels and like, go on the greens and change the water, which was amazing because it took me like 40 minutes. So I got like 40 minutes to just drive a golf cart around. It was awesome. But when I was in the laundry room cleaning all the laundry, I had sports talk radio on, and they had like the main station here, which was Team 1040, which is now TSN 1040. TSN is like the Canadian ESPN basically. Yeah. And I would listen to the afternoon show all the time, and that like just that being there, like it made work so much better because I could listen to sports, but also like I'm learning from these guys when I'm in the car, when I'm taking my kid to daycare, I'm going to the gym in the morning. Sports talk radio is on all the time. Like I'm always listening to stuff, and it's stuff that I might not even care about. They're talking about MLS soccer or something. I'll listen because like you can learn something from it, right? So that's another thing is like find content that you like and try and model yourself after that and try and learn something from it because you can learn from everyone.
Well, that's an interesting thing too, that, one of my teachers when I was in college was talking about it. She was like, well, obviously not talking about like a company. And she's like, look outside of your industry and, maybe pull some things, outside of, instead of, basing yourself on what other people are doing. And so, you start to look at, like I like basketball, for example, you look at basketball or, before starting the podcast, I was trying to watch other podcasts, like Joe Rogan's podcast, for example. It's the biggest podcast in the world. So you figure out like the biggest thing for me is how can I try to make it a conversation and not fall into the habit of simply asking questions, which I'm still struggling with. But there's things you realize where there's so much you can do as a host. And it also depends on whoever's on there with you. Like I noticed with Joe Rogan, they want to talk. They're interrupting him. They want to talk. So it's like, and try to pull from different industries, things outside of MMA. Like what can I bring into my own content that I can use to improve? So I think, for anyone trying to improve, it would be good to, sometimes look outside of MMA, and exactly like you're doing with the sports radio talk.
Yeah, and don't just watch sports. Like I watch Logan Paul's content. I watch No Jumper. I watch a lot of YouTube stuff that does very well because I'm trying to learn different things. I mean, I might not even like the content, but the presentation, you can take a little bit from everyone, honestly. Like I recommend a lot of people do that. I don't know why more, and again, I'm not an expert, but these are just things I noticed, but I don't know why more MMA sites aren't watching other YouTube content because it seems like they're not utilizing a lot of what they're doing. Like I'll give you an example. So there's some outlets where they will put in the thumbnail, they'll put the fighter and then they'll say such and such does interview with such and such. That doesn't matter. Like no one's there to see the person interviewing them. They're there to see the fighter. That's what it should always be about. It shouldn't be about who's doing the interview. So I think that's kind of a waste of space. I would put the fighter on there. I would put, any sort of information there. And I think clips are good. Joe Rogan does this all the time with all of his podcasts. So there's a particular topic, you put it on your channel, and that 5 minutes might be like, like they were talking, like, let's say they're talking about something you like. Let's say someone's talking about Tyson Jones Jr., right? So you go on there and you watch some guest on Joe Rogan talking about that. Well, maybe the guest sounded pretty interesting. Okay, well, I want to check out the full interview. So that's another way to kind of bring people in. And that's something a lot of the YouTube content creators do, is they create clips, and then that's sort of a teaser to pull you into the other stuff. And same thing with social clips. Like, you should be putting your clips on Instagram, Twitter, those little 30-second clips, because those are little teasers that will draw you in. If I see an interview with someone, I might not be that interested, but oh wait, they're talking about this. Well, I want to hear more what they have to say about that. So that's another way. And again, these are things that I've just learned over the years. I didn't know about posting social videos. I thought it was a waste of time, but now I see the value in it, but I didn't 2 years ago.
And that's the thing with YouTube that I think you become very good at, and that's why so many people are hiring you to run their YouTube channel as well, is building it up and getting the subscribers and the views. I mean, it's such a grind. I mean, and like you said, it's figuring out, are the clips going to help? Are the thumbnails like, the thumbnails based on your advice? I put like just the fighter, and it was like, what event and their name, and then you try to get a
Keep it
title.
simple. You're doing it exactly how you're supposed to do it. Exactly. Like, that's like, hey, I didn't even know this guy was fighting, and they're fighting on this event. Okay, I'll click.
Well, that's the thing, is the pre-fight interviews, especially during the pandemic, like I felt like those were doing so good. Like, even prospects, they'd get signed to the UFC and everything would blow up. So it was like, you figure out which interviews do better, which guys I don't want to say which guys you should be talking to, but that you prospects are going to work because they're getting signed a lot. And a lot of people enjoy talking to the prospect or watching the prospect interviews. And not a lot of people talk to those prospects. Like, if you just type in interview, you'll find 3 guys. It's usually yourself, Mike Heck, and then, whoever the third
John
person you've
Coe,
never heard of. Yeah, that too. So no, it's just interesting trying to figure out what does well and what doesn't. And even the big guests, like, I had the nutritionist on the second episode who's legit famous. He's out here doing men's health and all that stuff. Didn't do that well views wise. So,
But you know why it didn't do well? Do you want to know why? Who's your audience?
Yeah. Well, yeah, I guess it's just
you're assuming that everyone who watches that knows who that guy is, and then also you're assuming that all MMA fans work out. Not all of them do. That's why it didn't work.
That's true. I mean, and then I see you do. For example, you speak about working out. I see you do a lot of podcasts. People ask you your daily ritual, and you talk about working out, and no one's ever followed up with you about the working out. I'm like, I feel like we have a gold mine of things James Lynch could tell you about.
I'm gonna film. Well, I'll never film myself in the gym, because I'm never gonna be that guy. That's not my style. But I like, now that I got this, I just posted some artwork. I don't know if you saw it on Twitter. I hired a graphic designer. Yeah. So yeah, they got me some artwork, and I've been waiting on it for months. Like, literally, I've been in talks since October about doing this. So I got some stuff out. The rest of it's going to come out later by the sounds of it. I talked to the guy this week, who, by the way, is the same guy who does Ariel Helwani's artwork. So I've been working with him, Robert Pearson, shout out to him. But no, I'm going to do a behind the scenes video blog, because people want to know what my day looks like. I don't think people realize, like, maybe all the other stuff that I do, which is, I'm up at 5 every morning. I get up at 5. I'll give you my routine here real quick, just to kind of, amuse our audience here.
There we go.
I'm up at 5. I always like getting up really early because, well, as far as I'm concerned, I'm on the West Coast. So I'm already 3 hours behind everyone else. So it's 8 a.m. Eastern time. That's how I look at it. So get up at 5, do like some gratitude stuff. Like, I always write down like kind of things I'm grateful for, do a little bit of meditation, all that. So just a way to like get your mind ready for the day. Then I go work out. I would work out right away, but my stupid gym has a policy now that if you're 10 minutes late, they charge you. So I can't make it to my gym. Like I'd have to, if I book a 5 a.m. appointment, that would mean I'd have to get up at like 4:45. That ain't happening. So I book at 5:30. They only do it in 30-minute increments. Not my choice, whatever. So then from there, I go to the gym. Monday, Wednesday, Friday, I do weights. So I did weights today. And then Tuesday, Thursdays, I do cardio. And I go for like an hour. Just do, I have like a sort of a set. I used to actually be roommates with a trainer. So he sort of gave me a program. I still use it. So I do that. Then I come home. Then I do a little bit of work. Then I wake my son up. Then I get him breakfast. Then I take him to daycare, and then I start my day. So already, from 5 to basically 8, I've done a bunch of stuff already and getting everything sort of organized. So that's sort of what I do. But I have to work out in the morning because I'm not that. I hate working out. I hate doing anything at night. Let's put it that way. If it's after 5 o'clock at night, I don't like doing anything other than watching TV or playing video games or hanging out with my son. That's about it. Like, I don't like doing work at night. That's why all my interviews, I'll schedule them early. The odd time I'll have to do like for example, if I'm interviewing like someone from Thailand, like a Piotr Jan or something, like, yeah, I'll do the interview late, but I hate doing it. I'm not as good. I'm better in the morning. I'm a morning person. So there's a little secret.
Well, that's the thing with me too. With this job, the problem is it takes up my entire day. Like, I'm up early, I'm home late. And that's the thing with working out. Like, I realized after an entire day of work, you don't feel like going to the gym and banging out the weights and everything. So, sometimes I have to get up at 4 a.m. and sometimes you only have time to do, say, like an hour of cardio or something. I mean, you try to do whatever you can, but I know for me, I have to have like in order to be motivated to get up that early, I have to have like a goal, like something to accomplish. I mean, is that the same way for you, or are you just one of those, I have to go there to kind of maintain and just be healthy?
I'd love to have a six pack. I don't think it's ever going to happen. I think at this point in my life, I'm kind of like, it's probably not going to happen unless I really diet hard. I mean, I love food. I try and eat
Yeah.
pretty healthy during the week. Like I do meal prep like on my own. I do it. I've been doing that for years. Even before like fighters started doing it. I like every Sunday I'll cook my lunches for the week. My wife makes dinner. We kind of split, duties on that sometimes. She's been doing a lot of cooking, so shout out to my wife. She's done an awesome job with that. But yeah, in general, like I try and eat healthy during the week. Weekends, I'll enjoy myself. I want a pizza, I want whatever, I'll have it. But no, the getting up and going to the gym thing's not a big deal for me because A, I've done it for so long, and B, like I can't really sleep in because like my son, no matter what, is going to get up at 7. So it's like, what's the point? I'm going to get like an extra hour, and then I'm already behind because I gotta like we have a routine. Like if I break the routine, it's going to screw everything up. And I've had that happen where like I've gotten up a little bit later and it's just like, oh man, I haven't worked out and I got to shower. Like if you work out first thing in the morning, your day, I guarantee you will go better. And yeah, there's plenty of mornings I get up and I don't want to work out, but you got to do it. You got to just get through it. Even if I go and have a crappy workout, it's better than me not working out. That's how I feel. I can't, it helps with sleep. It helps with a lot of things. Like working out in the morning is one of the best things I can recommend.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it helps to wake you up too. And I mean, I noticed, it doesn't come off on camera, but I'm sort of a high energy person, you know what I mean? And you get up and you do, the cardio, the weights, whatever, and it helps your mood and sort of get rid of that excess energy throughout the day.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, I just like I said, it's just it's Tim Ferriss, all these motivational guys, they all sort of talk about this where it's like, complete small tasks first thing in the morning. That way you feel like accomplished. Like you go to the gym, you feel accomplished. You make your bed, you feel accomplished. All these like little things you can do that really just put your day. Cause I'll tell you what, like as I've gotten older, which I don't know why I keep fixating on my age here. I'm not that old. I don't look that old, but no, it's one of those things where like, a good day for me is an accomplished day. Like if I hammer out a bunch of interviews, did a bunch of stuff, was on time for everything, whether it's picking my kid up or, making a meal or something, like those are the best days for me. I'm not that guy. And that I haven't been that way for a long time, is the guy who just sits and does like a movie marathon all day. I can't do that because I get more satisfaction out of like what is enjoying for me. What gives me enjoyment is doing interviews, creating cool content, seeing those views go up on YouTube, seeing, good feedback. That's what gets me going. Like, to be honest, the time that kind of bums me out the most, and it's my favorite time of the year, is Christmas, because usually I'm not working that much. And it's so weird. Like I remember a couple of years ago, I was like, why do I feel so like, not depressed, but like, I just don't feel that good. And it's like, oh yeah, I'm not working. Like that's how much I love doing this. It's like when I'm not doing it, it kind of bums me out. So I'll probably do a little bit of work over the holidays. My wife's like, you got to take time off. And it's like, I don't know. Like I feel like, we're in this hamster wheel that just never ends. You got to stay on top of things. Right. So.
Well, that's the thing. It reminds me kind of, before I started the job, I put out that tweet and I was like, I hope it doesn't, lead to me fizzling out of the industry. And I think people sort of took that, I guess, the wrong way, because a lot of people were like, you can do it. How bad do you want it? And stuff like, it's like, that's not what I'm saying. I love doing it. I want to do it. But there's no doubt that when you go to work, like for me, if I go to work that day, I can't book any interviews because I'm going to get home late. I'm up early, and fighters are, when you find out that your schedule isn't that flexible, fighters aren't that flexible either. And, I had all these people like, do you really want it and stuff like that. And it's
those people are dumb. I did comment on that status because I did disagree with you a little bit, because I've done it. Like I literally did the 9 to 5 and then did this on the side. So let me ask you this. So let's break this down right now. What are your hours at Amazon? How often do you work? Does it change, or is it a set schedule?
No, it changes. Like, I might work 40 hours a week, 50 hours a week, but if
it's not okay. I see. So that does make it a bit tricky, because I had like a set schedule, like 8 to 4 or whatever it was. Okay, so let me ask you this then. But do you work like Monday to Friday, or do you work weekends too? Like, how does your schedule work?
That's the thing. Like this week, for example, I was supposed to work, and then they do Sunday to Saturday, for example. So I was supposed to work Sunday, Monday, Tuesday. I called out Tuesday because I had an appointment. Thursday, and then I was probably going to work that upcoming Sunday. So on a week like this, it's like, at first I tried booking as many interviews as I could into one day, but fighters tend to be a little bit flaky, and I'd get canceled. Like, can you do tomorrow? I can't do tomorrow. And as soon as you start saying that, that's when people are kind of like, well, maybe I'm not going to do it anymore if you're not willing to work with me. So it's it's been a challenge, to be honest with you, and that's why I focus on, at the very least, doing this podcast. That way there's still content going up, and there's not that much work that goes into it.
No, absolutely. And yeah, I mean, that is a challenge, obviously, if you don't have a set schedule, but like do you not get your schedule in advance? I guess what I'm trying to say is like, figure out which days you have off and, put out like a 3-hour block and use that as like a backup. So maybe you thought let's say you knew you had today off, book a 3-hour slot, do the same thing on Saturday. Like when I had a full-time job, how I used to do it was, I think it was, Monday, Wednesday, and I think like Saturday I would do interviews, like Saturday morning. Weekends are typically good for fighters because it's usually like a rest day or whatever. That's usually when I would book them. But yeah, I think it can be tricky. And there's certainly times I've missed out, or I've had someone text me like, hey, can you do this interview now? And it's like, I can't, I'm at work. So that can make things difficult, but yeah, it's just, you got to adjust. Or like, I mean, I've had stuff where you got like family plans. It's like, oh man, I can't interview Chris Weidman because I got to go to my in-laws, you know what I mean? So it's like, you do face stuff like that, but yeah, it's just, you just Google Calendar. That's my biggest like thing, is I just really like keep an eye on what's going on and try and like work around it, I guess. So.
Yeah, I mean, and yeah, I don't think people understood, like, coming in talking about, do you really want it? And, I'm juggling a job, and it's like, yeah, but my situation isn't necessarily your situation. And,
Well,
fighters.
let's put it this way. If you would have put the tweet out and you said, I have a full-time job, it's going to be challenging because the hours are all over the place, then people would have been like, okay, that makes sense. But if you just said, I got a full-time, because when people think full-time job, they think 9 to 5. It's like, okay, well, what are you doing from 5 to whatever? You're not a parent. So you don't have, and you're a single guy, I assume. So you don't have like obligations, right? Other than, so that's what I'm saying. It's like one of those things where that free time you do have, you could be using that for whatever. Cause there's I was telling you, there's a lot of times where I missed out on stuff with my friends because I was doing work, but I saw the value in it and I saw the investment in it, so to speak.
Well, the thing that people also don't realize is, up until like end of August, I was in France and I was going to school full time. But what people don't realize is, my typical day, I'm up early, whatever. And then I'd finish around 4 or 5 in the afternoon, which Eastern time, 10 a.m., 11 p.m. And then I have this whole slot for the rest of my day where I can book guys early afternoon. And it was perfect. That's when fighters are available. And so it's like, I've done the full time thing, but I had a different kind of time. Now I come home, it's like, 7 or 8 p.m. Eastern time. And, fighters aren't really trying to do stuff that late. So it's like, I've juggled it before, but it's different when, things run on US time, really. So when you don't have the time, US time, it does make things pretty complicated.
I understand. Yeah, there are challenges. Like when I was on, like it's easier now for me to book interviews being on West Coast time because I'm 3 hours behind Eastern. So it's easier for me to book stuff, which means I can, because like what would happen to me is like when I was on Eastern time, when I lived in Toronto, I'd be up at 8 in the morning. I mean, for someone in the West Coast, that's 5 in the morning. They're not going to get up and do an interview there. So I'm already missing those people. Whereas like now, like if I'm up early, like usually I can get more fighters. So it's a little bit easier and I end earlier. Like that was a big thing back when like I was still like freelancing, when I was still living in Toronto, is that like, I'd be late for dinner. I'd have to like cut into like my son's bath time because that's the only time I could do interviews or stuff gets postponed. So it can present its challenges, but yeah, you just got to do the best you can. But like I said, I think you're, like you said, you're doing, the podcast every week, you're being consistent. That's all you can do. As long as you're not, doing like 5 interviews one week and then abandoning the channel for like a month, you should be fine.
Yeah, I mean the consistency is what's super important because you can tell who has a future or not. I mean, one of the factors is the consistency. Like, do you start strong and then do you just end it, or are you, even if it's not a whole lot, releasing things every week? But another thing is, I know you get this probably way more than I do, but you have people reaching out for advice. Some of them try to be slick, like they ask for advice while also asking for Sean O'Malley's phone number. But
yeah, don't even get me started on that.
But the biggest thing where, I know if this person has a future or not is just look on social media and, are you being professional? Are you taking your social media seriously? And if you're not, then I can tell you right now, man, you don't have a future. Like you have to, pretend you work for like an ESPN or something, even if it looks a little bit silly because you don't. But the more seriously you take social media, because especially in this industry, employers, they're looking at your social media.
Everyone's watching your content. Even if you think they aren't, they're watching. And that's literally how I've got most of my jobs is people have come to me. I haven't really applied for anything. And I'm not saying that again to be conceited. It's just that like, you have to remember that people are always watching your content no matter what. People know, like I was talking to someone yesterday and they were on a short list for like a really good opportunity and like, they didn't even know. And it's like, yeah, man, because everyone watches content. Like it's one of those things. The problem is, like I said, there's no blueprint on how to be professional or whatever. My advice is a couple things. Number one, don't post any like controversial opinions on social media unless you're ready for the feedback on it. 2, don't write anything negative to any journal. Look, there's journalists I don't like, but I'm not going to go and say you suck or whatever. Or people like tweeting Ariel and then I look on their bio and they're like, I run the whatever podcast. It's like, well, good luck. You're never going to make any money in this industry at like being like disrespectful. And yeah, I think the biggest thing with social media, like on fight nights, you want to do your scores, you want to, follow along and give your round by round stats or whatever. You want to like tweet out funny stuff. That's cool. But yeah, no fighter bashing, no journalist bashing, no like, and just don't treat it like a diary. I mean, like I think a lot of people should just put your like I just put my content on, I'll throw like the odd opinion, like, hey, that's a good fight booking or something. but that's it. Because to me, it's just a waste of time. I'm not going to argue with someone on Twitter. I'm making $0 if I do that. If I at least put a video out on my YouTube channel and someone doesn't agree with it, well, hey, you clicked on my video, I'm making a little bit of money off the monetization. So that's always how I look at it. But the biggest thing is just keep it positive. Negativity does not get you anywhere. And I know there's people who are like, well, look at what Barstool's doing. Yeah, well, Barstool built an empire and it took them like 10 years to get to where they're getting to. And they're allowed to do that now because that's their thing. Like people are like, we're going to be the next whatever. You're not going to be the next anything until you show it. So don't say that. Like, I love when people are like, I'm going to be the next Ariel Helwani. Well, maybe you will, but don't talk about it. Just show me.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, that's the thing I wanted to do too when I first started. It's like, I'll be like the cocky, confident guy. And then you realize like, no, that's not going to work. You're going to have
be
to
humble,
sit back
be
and
grateful,
grind.
when people say, oh, you're the best journalist in the industry, like I tell them, I'm really not. I mean, there's better people than me. There is, and I'm not afraid to say that. And maybe I'll never be the best journalist. That's fine. All I know is I like doing this. I love, I'm blessed enough to do this full time. But just don't have an ego. There's so many people out there where it's like they think they know everything and they're like telling people what to do. And it's like, you have no experience. Like, just be humble. That's my biggest thing. Be humble, be nice, be professional. If people reach out to you, you be nice to them. Unless they write something stupid, just ignore them. That's my advice, and you mentioned like sort of people reaching out and stuff. Like, yeah, here's a good tip not to do. Don't ask someone to come on your podcast and then you do the podcast and then they're like, hey, can you get me Paige Van Zant's number? It's like, no, I can't because I don't even know you. And like, you're just like, it's just so obvious what you did. You're trying to get me on to get contacts. Don't do that shit. That's stupid.
Yeah, I haven't dealt with that as much as you have, but you have people all the time where it's like, oh, how'd you book that guy? Let me get him. It's like, I have no idea who you are. You have 13 followers. Like, I'm not trying to be rude, or even you mentioned the being humble thing. I have people reaching out to me for advice, and sometimes I'm like, am I really the best person? Like, do you really want to be where I'm at? Like, why not be, where you're at? I mean, you're doing it full time. People respect you, and yet, like, you be a little bit more ambitious. Like, if you reach out to the right people for advice, like, I still give it, but I try not to, not have
Well,
a
if you're
big
good
head
at something,
about it.
look, obviously, like, yeah, I wouldn't downplay that. I mean, you know how to edit video, you know how to put this stuff together. I'm sure that's advice you could give people. You interview a lot of fighters, you could give that advice as well. But like, I have people all the time reaching out, being like, hey, can you read this? Let me know what you think. I'll be like, I can, but like, you probably want to go with someone who actually does more writing than me. Like, hit up Damon Martin, hit up, Sean Al-Shadi. Not like, I'm not that guy. Like, I'm not a good writer. I fully admit that. Like, I do writing. I obviously write at my interviews and stuff the odd time, but in general, like, I'm more of a video guy. So if you have questions about editing, about presentation, about, interviews, I can help you. And I'll usually try and give whatever advice I can, but then I'll usually direct someone and say, hey, look, get in touch with this person. They're the best at what they do. And that's, again, an ego thing. Like you said, like, I know there's people, there's someone I'll mention off air who's like, trying to give advice. And it's like, you don't even make $1 in this industry and you're giving people advice like everything. Like, you're not giving the right impression. Like, that's an ego thing. That's what that is. It's not even like you're trying to help. It's like, you're like, I'm so good that I can do this. Like, I put those videos out, right? And honestly, like, the reason I put the tutorials out there is because I get asked a lot of questions. So rather than me answering the same thing, I'm like, go watch this video. I'll make $1 or whatever off of it if you click on it. But at the same time, it's easier to see a video than me trying to explain something over DM. So that's why I do it. And it wasn't a cockiness thing at all. It's just like, I honestly get people hit me up almost daily for advice. And so I'd rather be able to give them something that I've answered 1,000,000 times as opposed to, me having to type it out every single time. So that's it. There's a difference there. And plus, like I said, I do this full time. So I have a little bit of understanding of what I'm doing here.
Well, those videos are super helpful because I have people, and it feels good to hear it. They're like, "Man, your stuff looks great. How do you do it?" And I'm like, what? I can't take credit for that because I'm doing the same thing James Lynch is doing. Here's this video. Here's how he does it. I just do the same thing, man. Just make sure you have the right equipment. So, those videos are super helpful, even for other people, who have to give advice.
And I got to make an update because the FaceTime one I did, I just found this out recently. I got a Mac. I actually got a refurbished Mac because the one I had before was super slow for FaceTime interviews. Yeah. Well, it turns out the software I use for FaceTime only works with older Macs. So that was one of the main reasons I upgraded. And now I can't. So now you have to, like, I don't know, I'm trying to figure it out. There's not a lot of resources out there for like recording FaceTime interviews. You can do a screen capture, but I think there's some patent on FaceTime that like won't let you record the audio or something. So I'm still figuring that out, but I got to do an updated version of that. I got to do an updated version on my setup too, because it's different than what I have on there. Yeah. The Skype thing's still the same. I still use that same method. I know some people like doing OBS or whatever, but I just like my method because I get 2 sources of video. So for me, it's easier where I can record myself and then I can record the guest. And that way, like if something happens with the guest or the video, like let's say I've had times where I forgot to record myself and I just have the guest. Well, at least that's why you're here in the first place. You don't necessarily need to see me. So at least that's saved. So there's like little things like that I got to update, but I just haven't had time, but I will hopefully soon. Now that I got this artwork, I'm going to start putting more stuff on my channel, stuff like that.
So it's been a little bit over an hour, but before we completely wrap it up, I see you have a podcast coming out that's going to be
Yes.
later today. Tell us a little bit about that podcast. What's going on
Yeah,
there?
I'm excited. So I just joined Fanatics View a few weeks ago. They're an awesome channel. So I'm doing boxing and MMA for them. And one of the things we came to an agreement on was me doing a podcast. I'm trying to think how many podcasts I do. I do my Monday show. I do the Q&A. And then, I think that's it. So I own Cyborg. Well, it's kind of like more of an interview, but I do the Cyborg show as well. But anyways, so they came to me with this podcast. So I'm with Kevin Banga, who, if that name sounds familiar, he's the manager of Nick and Nate Diaz. He also does content for Fanatics View as well. Great interviewer as well. I just spoke to him last week. We didn't know each other. We are both Canadian though, which is interesting. I didn't know that, but so we're basically doing a news show every week. I know there's a lot of news shows out there, but the bonus is with Kevin, he's got a lot of stories about the Diaz brothers. Mm-hmm. He's got a lot of connections in this industry with certain fighters. So we're going to do a news show. We're going to answer questions kind of like, like kind of this style as well. Well, people can come in and submit stuff. So we'll be doing that, but it's going to be debuting today, but going forward, it'll be 2 p.m. Pacific time, 5 p.m. Eastern time. For about an hour, we'll just be talking about some news, talking some stories from both of us, and then answering questions. And it's I'm excited, man, because I don't know a ton about Kevin, but I'm excited to dive into this and get people to see some more content from me on a regular basis.
For sure. And let's end it here with this. Let the people know where can we find you on social media, all that good stuff. And if you have anything you want to promote, plug, this is the time to do it.
I will. You're right. This is the time to do it. At Lynch on Sports, easiest way to find me. Twitter, Instagram, same handle. DMs are open. If you guys have any questions, anything I talked about on here, I'm happy to answer. I'd name all the outlets, but we'd be here all day, so I'm not going to do that. But just find me at Twitter is where I post all my stuff, so you can find it there. Otherwise, my YouTube channel, youtube.com/Lynch on Sports. All my content's on there because even the outlets I work for that I have to upload onto their YouTube channel, I put it on playlists on my channel, so you can find it there. Super easy. And thanks for having me on, Lucas. See, you were talking about this being a conversation. This is like a talk we would have even if this wasn't recorded. So this was fun for me. I like doing this type of stuff.
But that's a credit to you too, because I realize it's the guest too. Like you have some fighters, you try to make it a conversation, and unless you ask a question, they're not going to talk. And I mean, you're willing to do the back and forth, and that's what turned it into a conversation. So I do really appreciate that.
No problem, man. Happy to be on and happy to see the growth of the Lucas Grandsire experience. I feel like someone else has that podcast. No, I'm just joking. But no, it's I'm excited, man. I think it's cool. I like how you're branching out, and I think it's awesome that you're trying to do the full-time and part-time thing because it's tough, like you said. But keep with it, and like I said, only onwards and upwards.
There we go. Well, thank you so much for the time, sir. Thank you for coming on. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure. Happy to do it, and happy to do it again.